your studies with people who you just had a casual acquaintance with. I need to know something of the history of your community, its origin. There was once a very powerful, large Sikh state. It has fought for its independence. It has been persecuted for its religion. Could you sketch that out in some measure, and that would end the gap between you and me if I want to understand you with mind as well as with empathy.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'll offer two, you can tell I'm a professor because I'll always say I can give you two things. So I can give you two things. One is a bit about the origin of the tradition, and one is a bit on how I would interpret the core teachings. The origin of the tradition, it's one of the youngest world religions. It's about 550 years old. It originates in the Punjab region of South Asia, as Manaz mentioned, as Dr. Freely mentioned earlier. And it really emerges in a context that I think is very similar to what we have in the world today, which is very intense cultural mixing, religious, ethnic, linguistic diversity, and people trying to figure out how to live alongside one another. And a really intense hierarchy of social structures that lead to supremacy and oppression. And it's in this context that the founder of Sikhism emerges, Guru Nanak, and he preaches this idea of oneness. That is his core teaching. The term is Ik Oankar. It's the first term in our scripture. It's the first idea I learned growing up. It's the first thing I've taught my daughters. And it is this idea that we are all interconnected, that divinity lives inside each of us equally. And part of the teaching and the philosophy is this idea of connectedness creates a foundation of non-discrimination. This line that I was teaching my kids this weekend from the scripture, Avalalla Nurupaya Kudrat ke sabande ek nur te sab jag upja kaun bale kaun. It comes from a poet named Kabir, and he's saying, first God created the light, and from that light, the whole world was created. And if everyone's created from the same light, then how can we call anyone good or bad? It's a very simple move that he's making logically, but it creates this understanding, and it becomes the foundation of Sikh philosophy, that equality is a must-have across the board. And so when we're talking about Sikh men and Sikh women, right? Women have all the same rights within our tradition historically as men. We're talking about caste. The Gurus were very anti-caste. When we're talking about religious difference, right? There is no, in the Sikh tradition, no exclusive claim to enlightenment. You can be of any path and achieve enlightenment. So that's the founding principle of Guru Nanak. What that leads to is an outlook of love. If you can feel that connectedness in your daily life, then you can experience love in a way that goes beyond our mundane human interactions and experiences of love, and one that is constant and daily. And what that love does, and this would be the third principle in Sikh philosophy, is love inspires action. And that's where this element of service comes in. And that is, within Sikh philosophy, part of what it means to be spiritual. Right? To be spiritual is to be political, to be active, to engage in justice. And this is, as you're asking the question about what is this empire, what is this idea of independence, part of what's happening within Sikh history, and it's from the time of the founder, and you'll see it today, is this deep commitment to justice and freedom. And that is rooted in this perspective that we are all equally deserving, and if we really feel connected and care about one another, then we will do what we can to reduce suffering. And so that is something that I think is one of the most, for me, one of the most compelling parts of the tradition. It's not a tradition that tends to look inward only. It's a tradition that is focused on interior spirituality only. It's what I find is it's trying to find the balance between living a spiritual, enriching life and also engaging in the world around you. And that to me is a really important part of what it means to be Sikh. Thank you.
More questions? One more, and we'll let someone else have some votes.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
In last chapter, we in some class, we're currently discussing about Persepolis, and on the topic today of double consciousness. Do you feel like in your experience, you experience double consciousness in different ways?
Yeah, it's a good question. Thanks.
Please repeat the question.
Yeah, the question was, do I experience double consciousness in the way that, some of the more stellar Black writers have described? And I would say yes and, in that I do feel this question of double consciousness, of wondering where I fit in. But what I would also say is some people describe it as a split identity, and I don't feel that. I think I've become comfortable in understanding who I am and how my worlds weave together. I don't feel like I'm in a place where I did as a kid, walking around wondering, am I American today or am I not? What I've come to understand is that question is what other people can ask about me. But I become more clear that I can determine that answer for myself too. I think part of what that's looked like for me, and I think we all do this in our own ways, is becoming comfortable with the reality that we are complex beings and we have various layers to us. I think part of what I see with younger generations in this conversation with intersectionality that's different from when I was a kid is I didn't really have access to a frame like that. And so it took me a lot of intellectual work to get to a place where I could understand, oh hey, like I'm not just a Sikh or a Texan or a Punjabi or whatever, like I'm all of those things and they all intersect with one another. And so yeah, yes and to your question on double consciousness. Thank you. Please.
How would you compare the experience of your growing up with the experience of your children in terms of what they're facing and what you were facing and where things have either evolved or have reverted back or gotten worse? Or like, and how do you help them navigate that, their experience?
Yeah, also, there's a lot that's different for my kids. One is, I grew up in Texas and they're growing up in Manhattan. Like it's a little different. They don't know what grass is. That's probably the biggest difference. I think for my parents as immigrants, they came from a context where, the way my dad describes it, he never had to ask himself the question of why he wore a turban until he moved to this country. And so the intentionality behind the practice was not always there for him. That became more salient when he moved here. And so part of his experience was he was figuring out for himself as he was raising us. I have the benefit of having their wisdom to apply and also having access to other resources within the American context. And so part of what's become different for me and how I'll say it a little bit more plainly. For my parents, preserving their heritage and culture was job number one. That was what was most important. It was their priority. For me, that is a priority. But what's more important for my wife and me as we're raising our kids, I would love for them to love our tradition. We're sharing it with them. But we are trying to instill in them the qualities and the traits that would ensure long-term happiness. And that feels a little bit different. I think my parents gave that to us. and we received that, but it wasn't as purposeful as a priority for them as it is for us. I will tell you, like, preserving culture and heritage is important to me, but more important than that is protecting my kids against the mental health crisis. Like, that's what I'm thinking about when I'm up at night. That's not what my parents were thinking about. And so, yeah, I think that is a big difference generationally as we're looking at not just how minority traditions are raising our kids, but how parenting is changing right now too. I mean, every parent I'm talking to is more worried about that than anything else.
Thank you so much. Now let's give her a big applause. Book right there, if you want to purchase the book. $28, so it's great to come up. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Yeah, actually, they tried to fire me, so it's back on. Oh, the 9/11. You know, it's really funny. I told the guy, I don't think we have, and I was like,